so I'll take an AI to start that thread. But yeah, mailing list, which I guess is more official than the Slack channel. Okay. Well, and I kind of lost track. We've canceled the last two meetings, and I've kind of lost track of what the remaining opens were. I guess we need to probably go through pull
I think
request.
we need to vote on the boot synchronization. So I put it in the chat. The Reza proposal for in-band PCI Express versus Intel versus the out of band with board management controller. And it doesn't know another. Maybe the first PCI Express can be long-term, but this is a, I think, more urgent topic, right, Reza?
Yes. Sorry, had a hard time getting off mute there.
Okay, so this is the so we just this isn't really a pull request. This is what's the full proposal.
Yes, this is a full page, full proposal of 3 options.
So do we need additional discussion, or can we just go straight to the vote?
I believe we have discussed it, unless someone feels that we need to have more discussion.
Okay, so my only concern about this is I mean, even if we voted to accept it, I don't know that I could get, you know, our BIOS team to agree to it, right? So that kind of creates my, and then we need.
Well, why don't we take time to get the feedback from respective backend teams and implementation as well?
Okay,
I was thinking
all
the
right.
same.
So even if, let's say we vote to accept it, right? Let's say it passes, right? That we still have to propose it to the PCIe SIG, right? And then it gets bounced around in there before it's going to go anywhere, right?
Except for ARM proposal to use DOE improvement, DOE. Objects, and then it doesn't have to be the same like CXL did, I think. It bypasses the SIG if we have our ECL.
Okay.
Yeah, and you know, HB is not hard over on the PCIe, the PCI solution, right? We recognize the fact that that's going to take a couple of generations to get the silicon implemented. Um, So right now, we're leaning more towards the out-of-band solution, out-of-band implementation.
Um, yeah, I think what would help move this along is probably something, well, so my experience with DMTF, right, is that, you know, we would have a, a, um, a voting mechanism where we formally kind of vote, and then if you say no, then you kind of have to put down your reasons why, right? I mean, you can always put down need more time, but then
But do you feel that with out-of-band offering, we have all the details flushed out? Because let's say we adopt this as a direction. I think that first of all, we need to work the diagram a little bit better. I think is not reflecting of all the things. We need to work on the state sensors, PLDM registers, and define those very well. So I think that the direction-wise, even if you go with out-of-band management, we still haven't agreed whether it's PLDM or RDE or SPDM or something else. We haven't agreed what physical transport we're using, and we didn't define the registers properly. Am I wrong?
no, you're not wrong. So by registers, you mean the state sensors?
Yeah.
But is it necessary to define all of those things first? Or is this, you know, I see these three options as directional. And, you know, there are details to be flushed out.
We can vote on direction, I believe, Reza, that's fine. But eventually our goal is to be vendor agnostic, right? So implement
Correct.
one. So in order to do that, we need to really lock down in the spec exactly the implementation, right? So we can do a pre-vote on just on the direction that we all okay with going out of band. And then we'll have flash all the low-level details, really focus on all the details of option 3. We deep dive on all the register, lockdown in the spec, and then we will do another vote on something like that. But that's fine.
I would recommend that as the way to go.
Yeah, that's fine. Leo, want to call for a vote today?
Okay. All right. So can I? Okay. Do we have, what kind of representation do we have here today? We have. We'll pull that without.
We see Intel, AMD, Marvell, HP, Dell. Not seeing anybody from NVIDIA.
I'll record. Probably in the future meetings, I want to try and have a recorder as well as a meaning someone who takes minutes, such that it's not just me trying to lead the meeting and take minutes. So what's on the table is a vote on the PCIe in-band method first. We're going to vote on that and then vote on the out-of-band directionally, or both of these directionally, and then file defects against whatever we feel like are opens. Is that the Is that the action we're agreeing to?
I'm a bit unclear. I was thinking maybe we'll just have one vote in which we select our desired path, or
Okay.
1, 2, or 3.
Does anybody want to second that proposal?
I agree with Reza.
Okay, all right, so directionally, if I were to vote for Dell, it would be the out-of-band method. So then we need HP's vote.
Let's maybe put
other-
votes in the chat,
Yeah,
so it's recorded.
And then just put the company name you're representing in front, and then we can. I guess if I had been more sophisticated, I could have done a tally thing. It looks, so we don't have NVIDIA, but I believe they expressed, at least orally, that they were. So Marvell still would like option 1, which is the in-band method. Is that on? Wait.
Orally, NVIDIA supports option number 3, and we need their either vote or we vote without them.
So
Somebody from Intel, you can vote.
I'm here from Intel, but I don't really feel super comfortable voting. I think it might be better if other people in the company and myself kind of speak about it. Would it be possible to put this vote on Slack maybe for a few days as well? Or do we want to do it right now?
we can do that. I mean, you know, that would be fine. We could do it. We can hold the final results till next week.
That would be good. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, but kind of reading the room, the consensus seems to be more towards option 3, out of band.
Yeah, if there's no point in I mean, if the Intel's vote won't really change anything, there's no point in maybe doing that.
I'd just like to state that we would prefer option 1, but it's we're okay with the out of band also.
Do you want to add any color to that, or any details of why that preference is to maybe influence others?
Yeah, we can mention that on Slack.
And for option 3, we assume what the BMC will be always available. Is that correct assumption? Because I remember we discussed the cases when some system might not have BMC.
That's a good point. It's applicable only for the system that have BMC, correct?
Yeah.
So what about the cases without BMC?
That was one of the reasons why we went with option 1 also.
So to explore that a little more. Okay, so the coordination would only be with BIOS on boot, but you can't address. You'd have difficulty probably addressing some of the other flows, right? The coordinated shutdown. right? Because BIOS is gone as a process, or who's receiving the messages, right?
I have a point to make on the coordinated shutdown. So usually coordinated shutdown is only possible in scenarios when you have a friendly tenant running up on the bare metal level or up on the host. In cloud deployments, you don't control that directly. You can't expect someone to have a piece of specific, things or OS or version that supports that driver. Maybe I'm just theorizing how this will work for cloud deployments.
Bare metal cloud.
Yeah, bare metal cloud. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah,
I think we stated function level reset in this page. I share in the Slack that function level reset will be leveraged for this type of thing. That is supported and is issued always. You can correct me if I'm wrong.
So would this require this function level reset? Would this require a specific version of OS, or are we with certain specific drivers that are embedded in the operating system or the kernel as well?
well, so I think it implies that you either have a friendly OS, and I'm not sure all the this diagram probably could use a little work, but it either requires that you have friendly or OS, or that the OS doesn't really have direct control of power, meaning when the OS does a shutdown, there is something else that can hold the power up, right?
But that is already the case, isn't it? Because the power is not related to the OS booting, even today with BMCs and whether you have whether it's a cloud or private cloud or public cloud deployment, anything should have exactly same scenario. In other words, I don't believe that power is directly associated with.
Well, it's not directly, but the OS provides the stimulus that says, hey, I want to reboot, right? Okay. Now what it means is something else, right? Some other entity. It's either going to be a BMC or some kind of UEFI runtime, callback that's going to
Correct.
change that sequence, right? So that it just,
yeah. In that case, Lee, wouldn't it be okay to assume that you don't need places where you don't need this level of coordination? The BMC is controlled by the cloud provider in non-friendly cases. In friendly cases, let it be coordinated through that. But assuming that the power reset is a must upon reboot is probably, we all know, is not the right assumption. On the other hand, having to mandate that on a host reboot, DPU should reboot is also probably not true, is where I'm getting at. So doing it to PCIe, if that's a motivation to consider doing it to PCIe, then I don't know if the motivation itself is valid.
But the function level reset that the host issues to the DPU can trigger any types of behavior in DPU. It doesn't have to reset the DPU itself. DPU can get this notification, just release the resources associated with that host and not reboot. But that is a method for notification that host is going for a reboot.
I see. Okay.
And it's according to PCI Express spec. So all operating systems support that function level reset. So we are not relying. Yeah.
The thing to be concerned about is what you get that notification, and then how long is it between that notification and power being removed from the slot, unless you have independent power, right? If you're pulling power through the Goldfinger's, the PCIe slot, or or even an external power supply. That power supply can remove DC power. So,
So you see there are two levels. One is a software reset when there is no power involved here. The host issues reboot. This is completely software reboot, right? Or it's not a power cycle, right? And the second is power cycle like behavior. So in shutdown or reboot cases, when it's just a software behavior, GPU will still have power. Doesn't have to be on auxiliary separate power domain. In the power cycle, the power is being yanked from both host and GPU. That is what you're saying, Lee?
yeah, I'm trying to think if I think even see, I guess, yeah, on a warm reset, you won't lose power on the PCIe slot, but that may be somewhat vendor specific. I'm not sure that once you get the soft reset, I'm not sure how long there's no guarantee that you're going to keep power, probably. But I'm not a PCIe expert. So I don't know that there's currently probably not any way within the PCIe spec. There's not a concept of preparing a card for loss of power. They just assume that you can remove power, you can yank power from the device.
So we started this discussion of can we vote for option of number 3 out of band if there are deployments without having out of band board management controller. And Reza said that long term, maybe the first option, PCI Express, could be a not bad option, but it will take a couple of generations until it's adopted. So maybe the work group voting or direction can be long term, we want to do the PCI Express and we want to go as OPI, we want to go into PCI Express SIG and work on option number 1. This is going to be a long-term solution and also is going to be a solution for all the deployments that doesn't have. Board management controller. For the deployments, that's what we want. It's too complicated.
Correct. Okay. All right. All right, so the action items are to push out requests or to put out a request for volunteers, leadership volunteers, right? And then also to finalize the vote directionally for next week. And then we could add in there a time horizon, like 12 months versus 2 years. Okay.
Sorry, I don't know if you heard my comment because I got kicked off. I'm back. I missed the last 2 minutes or so. I was wondering, could we have the primary method as out of band, and a secondary method of the DOE, which would be the in-band method, to accommodate those, hosts that do not have a BMC. But in the case of hosts that do not have a BMC, is that a statement about not having a separate BMC entity, or it's not even having a virtual BMC, that is a BMC that's sort of embedded in the host processor? Meaning that it may not have, the host may not have a physical BMC, but it has the BMC functionality.
So. Yeah, I think it's more of the host doesn't have a trusted BMC, but I don't know. It's a bit of a hard argument, because I have questions about that, because it seems like from what I see, BMCs are going everywhere, right? There's more and more BMCs coming in, not less, right? So it's hard to imagine that the next generation, there'll be a next generation of servers without BMCs, right? Or we're going to get rid of BMCs. But that just could be my perspective from what I see, right?
And Daniel, when you mentioned hosts without BMCs, I'm assuming you meant edge type devices, right?
Yeah, I think so. I don't remember who in the previous meetings mentioned, but some of these devices may exist. So they may use the DPU, but might not have BMC.
Right.
I don't have specific example. Sorry, I just heard the opinion of other people what it's a possible case.
Yeah. I think we need to make a distinction in terms of it may not have a physical BMC, but it may have the BMC functionality. And that's an interesting statement about the trust that you brought up, Lee. So we probably need a definition of what we mean by BMC on the host.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So every time we bring up bare metal cloud, the question always becomes, where do you draw the line? Like what is protected infrastructure versus, guess. So. Okay.
One question about the interface between the GPU and the BMC. Is that like based on like a SPI or I2C, or it's a other interface?
So we had those architecture diagrams, right? This is not the way to look at this. All right, we'll go to
I think there are two questions here, Daniel, to what you're asking. First of all, is what protocol you're using? Whether PLDM is what we're using, and then what is a physical transport that PLDM is running on top?
Yes.
So what's assumed in this diagram is that you have an RBT connection and I2C SM bus. In the future, there may be USB here. I mean, that's part of the OCP3 NIC spec, but it's not. Well, it actually became part of the PCIe Chem, a possibility in the PCIe Chem as well.
But I think we need to vote on this and adopt this, right? Going forward, I think that USB, Goldfinger's CAM connector, this is going to be the right approach. And we need to all to agree and vote on it. So PLDM over MCTP over USB, right? No? I put in the chat the link to the MPF specification.
So that goes back to all the vendors and their roadmaps on what I mean, we can, you can certainly make a table of what is supported on existing hardware today, right? Where they've released, where everyone has released their specs, right? Or, user documentation.
We can say this is a goal. This is what we want to do in the next generation of all the DP vendors. And until the USB is fully supported, we can say, I don't know, I2C or RBT and CSI or something else.
I agree. This we need to go what we know for sure today, and have enough flexibility so that we can adopt other interfaces, physical interfaces in the future, such as USB.
Right. But if we're just doing PLDM MTCP over USB, then transport didn't really change the definition of the protocol, right?
Correct.
Yes.
It's just it may take the DPU vendors some time to have that USB interface working. Because that could involve either silicon change or some translation chip.
Yeah. Agreed. All right. Were there any other topics for today? Anyone else wants to bring up?
I think ARM wanted to talk about the ARM trusted something.
Trust zones or trusted firmware?
Let me check. The DPU system ready markdown page that Summer from ARM created. I posted in the chat.
Summer cannot join our meeting today.
This one?
Yes.
Would somebody else like to share and go through this, or?
We can postpone it to the next week meeting. Someone can go over it.
Can you give kind of a high level, I guess it's not a very long page, is it? This is it. So this is, you're just talking about the certification.
Right, we have several requirements, specifications listed on the left side, like a BBR, BSA, BBSR, and we have certification program which we call System Ready, which including certification for different parts of the system, requirements, security requirements, and they all under System Ready umbrella. We also have the certification test suite, which contain multiple tools, which is open source tools to test different parts of the system, including like a UEFI tests, ACPI tests, SM-BIAS tests, different security tests.
Okay, I mean, yeah, I'm not exactly. So one of the things that this has some implications, right? There's, you know, there's certain processor families that support this, and there's others that don't, right? Within the ARM ecosystem.
It's applicable on all A-class boards.
And I think the proposal was to vote that all DPU vendors participating in OPI must comply to those certification programs.
Yeah, I'm struggling with the role of OPI and this. So if someone's using a RISC processor, do we have to approve their, you know, certification standards as well?
Good question, Riza.
Yeah, I mean, this is saying only ARM. I mean, this bullet right here makes a lot of sense to me, right? But I'm not sure the rest of it does, right? Other than because we're kind of leveraging this, right? But I think there's a lot more in the ARM system ready requirements.
Some of the requirements like UEFI, ACPI, SM-BIAS, like a secure boot, TPM interfaces, they are supposed to be common and not directly related to ARM. So those tests should be compatible with other platforms which implement those standards. So we can probably go into the details with summer, but we kind of think what most of the tests will be proposed here should be should work on other platforms. Because on ARM, try to standardize things like the UEFI. We don't have anything specific for ARM, so it follows the UEFI spec, similar to the ACPI and so on. So it's not ARM specific.
I think
So
what
that's-
also would help us to think about who we like doing OPI for, right? So there are also companies that want to come and develop code inside DPUs and IPUs. And I think we need to help them provide what things they can rely on that will always exist inside the DPUs, and what things are optional or not exist there. For example, if I'm writing something security oriented and I need root of trust or access to TPM storage or ARM trust zone or something like that, like what things that I can absolutely, as an application writer on the DPUs, what things I can rely on that exist versus things that are not there.
So is that part of within OPI, is there a group that's more closely related to the hardware architecture? Just, I mean, we haven't been talking about a lot about application specific things here. There's an API group, right? So I don't know. I don't know if this is the best group to handle this to discuss this requirement.
And my concern is more along the line is, does it have to be ARM specific, or can we make it more generic?
Yeah, I think that's the goal. We propose like what we have, the tools and specifications. But we think they can be applied on OPI and on the DPUs. If there are any changes, what have to be done to make it more generic, we are open to do that. But the proposal is we don't want to start from scratch. We already have a set of tools what we like to contribute and what we use them for testing. And as I said, we open to in changes what should be done to make it more generic.
I think like we did with SMBIOS, which is not ARM specific, right? We adopted the DMTF SMBIOS spec, so application writers, system engineers can rely on SMBIOS being correct. I think that was at least an idea here as well. So I share as a concern whether it's too ARM specific.
Did we lose Boris, or did I get lost?
I can hear you, Lee.
Okay. Lost Boris. The other thing that I'm curious about is you have to have a TPM to pass this suite, right? I mean, it talks about TPM interfaces are implemented, but if you don't have a TPM down on the board, how could you verify that?
Well, does it have to be a virtual TP, or does it have to be a physical component down on the board, or can it be
FTPM.
Can be either way.
Can be what?
It can be either way.
It can be a virtual TPM, okay.
Yeah, but if you're making a virtual TPM, don't you have to sacrifice a core to the trusted firmware to implement that? Or you have to put that.
Why you say sacrifice? You will gladly give that core.
Gladly give the core up to create a firmware TPM. Right. I don't know. I don't know that this all, I don't know that the TPMs are really present in current devices. So it may be in, I don't know. I'm always a little hesitant to put down requirements that are going to cause that could have real cost, right?
I think I think Intel and AMD they implemented in their own ways. I don't have details, but for ARM case, for virtual TPM, for firmware TPM, you don't need to have dedicated core for it. This service is running as part of the trust zone,
Okay.
and it has its slice of the time when the request issued to the TPM. The request passed to the trust zone, and it can be there a certain amount of time. So in general, it's just another process on the core, which will have its time to execute. But it's located in secure space, so normal world cannot see it.
But the implementation of the trust zone of elements, right? That is going to be owned by each vendor, like the DPU vendor, DPU IP vendor, right?
Yes, it's each vendor can implement their trust zone services as they
Like ARM provides, like here's some example ones, right? And then if you want to augment or enhance this, you can, but that firmware is ultimately signed by the vendor of the DPU vendor, right?
Right, it should-
Who signs it? Who owns it, right? Who's the entity that actually builds it and owns it?
It in general it should be in the chain of the verified boot, right? When you load the firmware, it should be verified. So trust zone firmware follows the same way. So in general, it should be signed by the platform vendor or firmware vendor with the certificate which signed by the platform vendor. So it may be, but what I'm trying to say, it's still controlled by the platform vendor. So if for example Dell is the vendor of the DPU, Dell will sign certificate which will be used to authorize the to verify the TPM firmware TPM. Does it make sense?
Yeah, right. It's just it's not, yeah, it's okay. I said this right. ARM is providing, I guess what I'm teasing out is that each vendor is then going to be responsible for making sure that they either have a hardware TPM down on their board or they include a firmware TPM alongside their other firmware, right, that they sign. So it just creates a bit of
But we should mandate that, Lee. Can we really operate under an assumption that we don't have TPM, whether it's hardware or firmware or emulated?
So
I don't
there,
think we
there
can
are,
develop.
there are,
Go
there
ahead.
have existed DPUs without TPMs, right? Or, you know, we can let the different DPU vendors reply for cards that they currently ship, right? So I'm not sure that, okay, I'm just saying the ecosystem may not be 100% there yet for you to put a TPM requirement on there. Would not be a,
But if we as a community believe this is absolutely necessary, right, and the customers demand it, the DPU vendors that don't have physical TPM can run software or emulated FTPM, whatever. And maybe this will influence them, and the next generation will put TPM. We don't require them to change their shipping cards.
yeah, I think there's some debate. Well, okay, so there's probably some debate on what is the root of trust and who is attesting to a particular platform, right? Like, how does this get aggregated together and et cetera, right? So if DPUs are completely independent and they're required to implement everything the server does, that's one way of looking at things. If the platform BMC somehow gets required to attest and take measurements of the DPU and then provide that, bubble that up, then that's potentially a different path. So
Yeah, that's a good point. Do we have the requirements for GPU supposed to provide the attestation data? If it does, if it required, so the BBSR says if the measure put is required, then you should have TPM. If measure
I think
put is
we
not
have
required,
to. We have no choice, I think, Lee and Daniel. Because we see a lot of customers demanding for untrusted host, DPU have to have root of trust, TPM, and this is a gateway in the server for many deployments. Not saying 100% all of them, but we see trends that moving in those directions. So I think we have no choice by making that assumption and going forward with that.
well, we've hit the top of the hour. Been a good discussion today. I will try and send out minutes later today. But I don't think we're going to resolve the root of trust thing here in the next 30 seconds. So. Good discussion. We'll tee it up for next week. All right, and then we'll have those discussions in the discussion board this week and try and drive that to conclusion. Okay.
Thanks
All
for
right.
stepping up, Lee. Appreciate it.
Thank you. All right. Everybody have a great week.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
but